Okay, our question was, how do student engagement coaches help students to engage in learning maths? So, why did we choose student engagement coaches? Well, previously we provided one-to-one support in the form of what we called a skills gym. And this was one-to-one support or small group support from a maths teacher. Problem we had with this was that it was difficult to staff through the week, and also finding suitable accommodation was a challenge. We decided that the individual needs a holistic approach, and I'm just going to share a quote. This quote from Devine et al. Confirms the more student-centered approach that we wish to take. So it's not just about the academic stuff. We need to address the learner as a whole. There's a lot of things that need to be sorted before they can begin learning. And maths teachers don't have the time to do it all. We need a group of people around the learner. Coaching is about building a relationship of trust with each student where they feel safe enough to be open and honest about their feelings towards learning maths. Obviously, with the cohort we're working, the learners' perceptions can be quite negative from previous experience and may well be reluctant to speak directly to a maths teacher, as maths teachers are good at maths, have had success. The coach, importantly, is a neutral figure. It's important to say that we did already have support measures in place at the college in the form of progression coaches, and they're located in a centralised hub, but they're not maths specific. And one key issue is addressing the affective domain. What do I mean by that? So we need to deal with the student's beliefs, attitudes, and emotions. This is the affective domain before a student can make real progress in learning maths. So this is talking about how the student feels. I can or I can't do maths. I like or I don't like maths, and anxiety. And this can lead to a lack of confidence and a fixed mindset. So this quote from Sue Johnston Wilder et al. Explains that an emotional response is a fundamental feature of the brain. And this is rooted in the amygdala in safeguarding animals. In other words, if an environment is perceived as threatening, the emotional reaction overrides the reasoning process and they move into the danger zone. A fight or flight reaction takes place. So we were extremely fortunate to work with Sue Johnston Wilder, and we ran a coaching for mathematical resilience course at the college. And we had 12 members of staff cross-college who had maths anxiety, and that was a brilliant introduction for our new coach who joined us in November. It's important to say that with full-time maths teachers have got very little time to address the affective domain as well as do the maths teaching. It was never our intention for the coaches to replace the expertise provided by a maths teacher, but to support them in addressing the barriers to learning. So, as I mentioned before, we're not looking for a maths specialist, so the recruitment process was quite a challenge. We needed somebody that could empathise with the students' negative feelings towards maths. This was the priority. And the challenge of getting the job description right, we did that a few times, and we had 4 rounds of recruitment. Why was recruitment such a problem? Well, we as I said before, our first coach didn't start until November, and unfortunately left in 3 months. They had a new job opportunity. There was then a gap of a month until 2 new coaches joined us, and our 3rd coach, Georgie, joined us after Easter, right in the middle of lockdown. It was also difficult to find accommodation for these people. So in the early weeks, it was important for the coach to familiarise themselves with the further education landscape. They were new to that culture, so it was important that they got to know vocational tutors and the existing support mechanisms in place, and that they were raising awareness to the rest of the college about the role of the coach. And obviously a massive part was the Coaching for Mathematical Resilience course, which enabled us to form our referral criteria and our process for doing so. What we really wanted to do was make this sustainable, and so the coach and the vocational tutors and support staff and e-learning excellence coaches, EHCP coordinators, all did this course, and the feedback was incredible and really created a buzz around helping our students deal with maths anxiety. Thank you very much to Sue for working with us. So, being new to action research, we accept that the above list looks pretty big, but what we wanted to try and do was triangulate our evidence. So this involved pre and post interviews with students, an observation schedule for teacher feedback on any changes in behaviour, an adapted anxiety scale, attendance data, although that's not the full story, as we all know, and latterly Hegarty Maths. But the most important and particularly useful was the reflections of our coaches. So these are the support strategies that we identified. I'm not going to talk about these in detail as they're listed in the report, and we need to crack on. So our findings. Obviously, like everybody else, we were hampered by the COVID-19 situation, but the main issue for us was having coaches in place. And in the report, we've got a little graphic to show when we actually had somebody in a coaching position doing this job. We were quite limited with that, which obviously meant that there was a short period of time in which learners were worked with, and there was a gap in continuity. Half of the students improved their attendance during the intervention, phase 1. So this was the November to January period. Post-intervention, when the coach left, attendance dropped for 3/4 of the students. Unfortunately, we didn't complete the maths teacher observation schedules. We did have changes of classes and maths teachers, which interrupted that. But we also found that from coach reflections that those support strategies that we wanted to use became limiting. So it was felt that we were trying to pigeonhole students into a particular strategy to identify which one was most effective. That actually was probably more detrimental, and so we moved on. Phase 2, a different period, and really important to identify that this is during lockdown. At this point, we had 2 coaches in the Cambridge campus. And one of them, Georgie, had only joined us after Easter, so, you know, brand new to the role. Although the great thing was that the new coaches had quite a bit of experience in learning support and were familiar with the college and its systems and the people working in it. So that was a massive advantage. Attendance improved for 8 of the 18 students that the teachers identified. 14 of these engaged with our Hegarty Maths platform, which we just introduced before lockdown. Reflections, as I mentioned, were much more important to us than the quantitative data. So what I'd like to do is play a 5-minute audio clip with an interview with Georgie, one of our student engagement coaches, who joined us 4 weeks into lockdown. What an introduction.
Unsurprisingly, there were a number of challenges that came when the country went into lockdown. I'd say that one of the main challenges we faced came from the nature of online learning. So that's when we rely on virtual platforms to contact our learners. But obviously this meant that we could send a message, but sometimes we may not get a reply. So this could then be difficult when trying to, number one, monitor engagement levels, and number two, encouraging students to actually engage. So I would say this has been one of the main challenges faced by myself and our other student engagement coaches. However, I would also say, though, that on the flip side, I think that these platforms have given us a unique opportunity so we can have conversations with learners in a space where they feel comfortable and where they can ask for help away from their peers, which is obviously different to being in a classroom.
So is this using a separate channel on Microsoft Teams, for example?
Yeah, it's using the chat section so that we can have a one-to-one discussion either in their classes, so during the class, or outside class lessons as well. So it might be in-class support, or it might be having a conversation before or after a class.
Fantastic. And I know from personal experience, I found that very helpful, getting feedback from the coach when in the middle of an online teaching session.
Definitely, because, you know, on Microsoft Teams, like we use, maths tutors can't be delivering their content as well as checking on every single learner that's in the class on the private chat. So I think that's a useful part of our role at the moment. Fantastic.
What would you consider, I know you've had conversations with the other two coaches, obviously. What would you say worked particularly well over the last, during the intervention period?
Yeah, so I mean, we've reflected a lot, but I think if I was to narrow it down, I would say two of the most effective things have been, firstly, having a collaborative approach with other student engagement coaches, with maths tutors, and also having conversations with the vocational tutor of the learner. So I think, you know, the experience we found ourselves in happened really quickly, and therefore it's impossible for us to have all the answers. But by making sure that we've got an open line of communication between staff members that are, you know, all to do with this one particular learner, it means that we're holistic in our approach. And I believe that then we're able to closely monitor the progress of our learners and ensure that we can then help them move forward. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd say has worked really well is being able to have a one-to-one dialogue with the learner, like I said before. And I think having a conversation which is free from judgment was a really important place for us to start with the learners. As I said earlier, we're in unusual territory, and because of that, I think it's important that the students feel supported as we all navigate through. And, you know, I think a bit of reassurance goes a long way. And even more importantly, I think if a learner feels they have space to be open and honest about how they're feeling, about their maths experiences, then that's when we're able to find and implement appropriate strategies to make sure that they feel comfortable.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem.
Thinking about the new academic year, at the moment, it seems likely that we will have to adopt a blended learning approach.
Yeah.
can I ask for your views on what we can do moving forward?
Yeah, so I think, like you said, we're likely to have a blend of online and face-to-face contact, which I think is going to bring a new take to this whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think this can have a really positive effect on the engagement, because I think that we'll be able to, it will help us with the challenge of the no replies on the online platform. So what I mean by that is, I'm hoping that by being able to have that initial face-to-face contact with the learner, it will give them the reassurance that the student engagement coaches are actual humans, and we're not robots behind the other side of a computer screen. And for me, because I started quite late, just at the beginning of lockdown, it means that these learners, haven't seen me, and all they can get from me is typed conversations and sometimes an audio call. So I'm hoping that this will build like a rapport and a level of trust much quicker between the engagement coach and the learner, so they'll feel more connected and more comfortable to discuss any of their worries or anxieties relating to maths. And yeah, I think this action research has given us a chance to experiment with different methods to see what works and reflect on what doesn't work. But if I've learned anything, I think that it's that if we want students to engage academically, I think we need to make sure that they are also engaged emotionally. And what I mean by that is to make sure that they feel comfortable to speak and to interact with their tutors and their peers, and that they still feel valued as a learner during this really weird and challenging time.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. So I just want to summarize some of the coach reflections. And there's a lot more detail on these in our report, which obviously will be published like everybody else's. Okay, so our conclusions. Our strategies must enable a flexible approach because our students are individuals. And I feel that this quote, which is taken from Diane Dolby's research summary for the Centres for Excellence, is highly relevant. So it's also important to match the coach with the student. So we're very fortunate to have a variety of people with experience, different personalities, age profiles. One of our coaches speaks several languages, which is a fantastic asset to have in the college. It's really important for coaches to observe lessons so they can understand from the learner's perspective how they feel, and it's a great common reference point, or common point of reference I should say, and also for the maths teacher to receive feedback from a trusted individual, I think is really useful. The reflections, particularly in phase one, the reflections of the coach revealed that several of the students had complex issues, and so there's a need for signposting to get expert help elsewhere. Collaboration, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with the team. I've learned a lot. I wish I had started the writing process a lot earlier, but that's a learn for next time. Yeah, this relationship of trust is absolutely important, not just between the coach and the student, but between the coach and the teacher as well. So, next steps. We recognise that particularly in phase one, we should have had more regular meetings to support our new coach in her first job since leaving university. And this would have enabled us to review caseloads, and we want to obviously manage that they're not swamped and that they're getting people that they can support appropriately. We want to use Microsoft OneNote to record coach reflections and kind of standardize the way that's set up. And then we have a transparency so that all the stakeholders can see what's going on. Everyone's kept in the loop. We want to widen the scope of our referral criteria. As I said before, they were quite limiting in a way. But we recognise from the coach's experience that there are quick wins to be had. One example would be simply a wake-up call to a student in advance of a maths lesson, or prompting a student during a lesson that the coach knows has the capability to answer. More responsive support with flexibility to enable a faster response. Less data-driven, we want. Developing closer links with other support professionals, including the progression coaches in the hub, EHCP coordinators, and the vocational tutors, etc. We want to widen the reach by involving another 2 teachers, including one on the Huntingdon campus as well. And we want to explore student feedback as evidence of impact. So we feel that we are now on track to move forward, feeling very positive, despite the difficult circumstances of the COVID situation. We've got 3 coaches in place and really looking forward to improving the situation come September.